Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll submit my remarks for the record, make a summary now, and I'd also like to submit two pieces for the congressional record, one a piece on ethnic politics in the Western Balkans, focusing on Bosnia and Macedonia, by my colleague Roland Joni, expert in international law and a senior fellow in political science at the University College Dublin, and then the Albanian platform in Macedonia, which I'll refer to later. Well,
those items will be included in the record without objection, as will the extension of remarks will also be included.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While the Dayton Accords ended the war in Bosnia in 1995, it did not resolve the Balkan conflict. The House Committee on Foreign Affairs made a very serious effort to reveal the realities of Slobodan Milosevic's 10-year occupation of Kosova and genocidal march across the Balkans, which ultimately claimed at least somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 lives and displaced 4 million during the Bosnian War. Under pressure from your committee, the Clinton administration finally initiated NATO airstrikes against Serbia in March 1999, as we know, to bring an end to the war in Kosova begun in 1998 as a continuation of the Balkan wars of the 1990s. Nevertheless, the roots of the Balkan conflict remain unresolved to this day, and the crux of the problem lies in the signing of the Dayton Accords. Why? Because U.S. Balkan envoy Richard Holbrooke, then chief U.S. negotiator at Dayton, cast Serbian dictator and later indicted war criminal Slobodan Milosevic into the role of the peacemaker, and instead of a peace agreement that would have outlined the steps to restore Bosnia-Herzegovina to its pre-war reality as a society of multi-ethnic and multi-religious harmony among Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs, Dayton divided Bosnia-Herzegovina, as we've heard, into two entities with a weak federal government, and incredibly, Milosevic was rewarded with the recognition of a previously non-existent political entity called Republika Srpska. And it has left Bosnia-Herzegovina on the brink of being ungovernable ever since, because Srpska blocks the federal government from functioning for the benefit of all Bosnian citizens. The second reason why the roots of the Balkan conflict were not resolved at Dayton is rarely acknowledged by Western governments and foreign policy experts, namely that Milosevic agreed to arrive at the negotiations only if two conditions were met: that Albanians would not be allowed at the table and that Kosovo would not be part of the agenda. This set the stage for Milosevic's military attack on Kosova in 1998. And by the way, he had always intended to carry out ethnic cleansing there before his troops invaded in Bosnia in 1992, but it was actually former Congressman DioGuardi, who I did not know at that time, and members of the Albanian American Civic League who were able to educate the U.S. Congress about Milosevic's plans, thereby placing the spotlight on Milosevic that led to his temporary exit from Kosova. Dayton's neglect of the Albanian issue is still a very live legacy, and the West's historical appeasement of Serbia is the principal problem. Belgrade has resorted to provoking violence in northern Kosovo, the area that has controlled and manipulated financially and politically ever since Kosovo came under UN protection at war's end in the summer of 1999. Unless the United States stops taking a back seat to Europe and the Balkans, Serbia will be admitted to the European Union, while simultaneously achieving what has always been its primary goal: the denial of Kosovo's sovereignty and the acquisition of northern Kosovo and Republika Srpska. The legacy of Dayton also includes the lack of reciprocity for Albanians in the Preševa Valley, where they're second and third-class citizens of Serbia, while the Kosovo Serbs have the highest level of human and civil rights of any minority group, I would add, in Europe. And the legacy of Dayton also resulted in the constitutional and systemic oppression and discrimination of Albanians in Macedonia. It's Macedonia that I believe the U.S. government must now focus on. It's frequently forgotten that when the former Yugoslavia disintegrated, the Republic of Macedonia emerged as an independent state without violence in 1991, based on the cooperation of ethnic Albanians and ethnic Macedonians. Macedonia is the only country in the Western Balkans where no one ethnic group has a true majority. But the subsequent failure to bring equal human and civil rights to all ethnic groups in Macedonia led to armed conflict in 2001. To end the conflict, as we know, the EU and the US government entered into negotiations with the ethnic Macedonian and ethnic Albanian political leaders. That resulted in the signing of the Ohrid Framework Agreement, which was supposed to achieve the equitable representation of all national groups in the state's institutions, as well as the equitable distribution of resources. 17 years later, Ohrid implementation has stagnated in relation to judiciary, law enforcement, military, intelligence, and fiscal decentralization, and ethnic Macedonian domination is constitutionally entrenched and yet to be addressed. The current political crisis in Macedonia cannot be resolved short of grappling with the key Albanian grievances. Macedonia will never become a functioning democracy if it discriminates against 30 to 40% of its population Albanian and other non-Slavs. But again, achieving ethnic equality now is at risk once more in Macedonia. In January of 2018, the Macedonian parliament twice passed the law making Albanian the country's second official language, which was mandated in an agreement between Zoran Zaev's SDSM party and the ethnic Albanian parties that called the Albanian platform and used it to form the new government. Even so, as we speak, Macedonian president, starting in January, President Ivanov twice vetoed it, claiming that a second official language would threaten Macedonia's unity and territorial integrity. The Macedonian constitution requires the passage of this law after 2 votes in favor, but this is yet to happen because Ivanov has declined constitutionally to sign the law, and he's now stoking ethnic tensions that may have domestic and regional implications. Ending discrimination against ethnic Albanians by providing equal opportunity for economic and social growth in areas where Albanians are ethnic majorities can dramatically reduce the possibility of future armed conflict. And I'll conclude, the question remains whether the United States and the European Union will step forward to negotiate a timeline to achieve full equality of the Macedonian and Albanian communities before the country's admission to NATO. Especially in Macedonia, we've witnessed a foreign policy approach in the US government for the past 20 years that focused on stability at all costs, as you have often pointed out, Mr. Chairman, instead of making conflict prevention and human rights the center of our engagement with the region. Hence, post-Dayton, the Balkan conflict is still unresolved. Thank you.